These are the 10 most expensive cars ever sold at RM Sotheby's auctions. From Ferraris that rewrote racing history to one-of-a-kind Formula One machines, each car tells a story of speed, legacy, and record-breaking prices. And number 1? It didn't just break records, it crushed them. Let's dive in. 10. 2013. Mercedes AMG Petronas F1 W04 Imagine, standing in front of a Formula One car that isn't just a piece of engineering, but a living memory of Lewis Hamilton's career-defining turning point. This car, chassis F1 W04, wasn't just any silver arrow. It was Hamilton's very first weapon after leaving McLaren, the gamble of his career. Many doubted his move to Mercedes, a team that had only just begun to show promise, but this machine silenced every critic. In 2013, Hamilton drove this car in 14 out of 19 races, and in Hungary, it delivered his very first win for Mercedes. That single victory was more than a trophy. It was proof that he had made the right choice. The roar of the 2.4-liter naturally aspirated V8 engine, one of the last of its kind before the hybrid era, carried not only speed, but the weight of history. Fans still remember its scream on the straights, a sound lost forever in modern Formula One. And here's the part that gives you chills. This is the only modern Mercedes F1 car not owned by Hamilton, Toto Wolff, or Mercedes itself. That means the one sold at auction is truly one of a kind, a piece of racing royalty that escaped the corporate vaults. When it rolled onto the auction floor in Las Vegas in 2023, you could feel the energy in the room shift. Phones rang. Bidders leaned forward, jaws tight, eyes locked. Then the hammer dropped at $18.8 million. The crowd gasped. History had been made. This wasn't just a sale, it was the rebirth of a legend. And the record shattered even Michael Schumacher's Ferrari. 1939. Alfa Romeo 8C 2900B, lungo touring spider. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the late 1930s. Europe is standing on the edge of war. But in the world of motoring, Alfa Romeo is creating what many still call the most beautiful car ever built. The 8C 2900B Lungo Touring Spider wasn't just a car, it was rolling sculpture, born from a time when Italian craftsmanship, speed, and elegance were at their absolute peak. Only 7 of these masterpieces ever saw the light of day, each hand-built with curves so graceful they looked like they were carved from wind itself. But the story of this particular car takes a wild, emotional turn. In 1949, it was shipped off to Brazil by a daring racer named Mario Tavares Leiter. Instead of treating it as a delicate jewel, he did something unthinkable. He stripped the body away, leaving only its iconic Alfa grille, and replaced the engine with an American Chevrolet V8. Why? Because he wanted to win. And believe it or not, he did. This Spider, mutilated but still alive, crossed finish lines and brought trophies home, and then it vanished. For decades, no one knew where it was. Whispers circulated in racing circles. Collectors wondered if one of the 7 was gone forever. When it finally resurfaced years later, it was hardly recognizable. A shortened chassis, a Corvette engine, a ghost of its former self. Some would have called it ruined. But destiny had other plans. In the late 1990s, a miracle occurred. The original touring body, somehow preserved, was reunited with its chassis. A painstaking restoration followed, led by Tony Merrick, who brought it back to life piece by piece. The hammer fell at $19.8 million, cementing its place in history. Think about that for a moment. This Alfa Romeo isn't just metal and leather. It's survival, tragedy, rebirth. It's proof that even after being stripped down, beaten, and forgotten, beauty can rise again. And that's why, when you look at its long sweeping fenders today, you don't just see a car, you see a soul that refused to die. 1994. McLaren F1 LM-Spec, the McLaren F1. Even the name makes car enthusiasts' hearts beat faster. When it launched in the early 1990s, it wasn't just the fastest car in the world, it was the purest expression of what a road car could be. Designed by Gordon Murray, it featured a central driving position, a naturally aspirated BMW V12 engine, and performance so far ahead of its time that nothing else even came close. But this story isn't about any McLaren F1. It's about one of only 2 in existence that were upgraded after production to full LM specification, the rarest of the rare, originally painted midnight. Blue and delivered new to Japan in 1994. This car traveled across continents from Japan to Germany, then to Singapore and eventually New Zealand. It had lived a life of privilege, pampered in collections, yet still driven enough to clock just over 13,000 miles. But it wasn't until McLaren themselves took it back and painstakingly rebuilt it to LM-Spec that it became something truly unique. LM-Spec meant more than just cosmetics. It meant increased power, aerodynamic changes, lighter weight, and racing pedigree coursing through its veins. Imagine a car that already broke every rule now reborn to an even higher standard. When it rolled onto the RM Sotheby's Monterey auction block, the atmosphere was electric. Collectors knew they weren't just bidding on a McLaren F1, they were bidding on one of the most exclusive pieces of automotive history ever offered. In just 4.5 minutes, it was gone. 19.8 million, just like that, snapped up and vanished into another private collection. For those watching, it was like witnessing a shooting star. Blink, and the opportunity was gone forever. The McLaren F1 LM-Spec isn't just a car, it's a once-in-a-lifetime chance. The kind of machine that makes even billionaires feel like kids begging. 1955 Jaguar D-Type Le Mans. Just the name conjures images of endurance, speed, and legends. In the mid-1950s, Jaguar was chasing glory on the world's most grueling racetrack, and the weapon they built for that fight was the D-Type. Sleek, aerodynamic, with its distinctive fin rising behind the driver's head, the D-Type was built for one purpose: to dominate Le Mans, and dominate it did. Chassis XKD501, the car in question, etched its name into racing history by winning the 1956 24 Hours of Le Mans with drivers Ninian Sanderson and Ron Flockhart. Averaging over 104 miles per hour, it wasn't just a victory, it was a demonstration of cutting-edge technology and engineering brilliance. But racing is never kind. After Le Mans, the car had its share of rough battles, tough races, DNFs, and wear that might have broken lesser machines. Yet in 1970, Sir Michael Nairn rescued it, restoring it lovingly to its original Le Mans winning condition. What emerged wasn't just a car, it was a time capsule, carrying the smell of burning rubber, the echoes of roaring crowds, and the triumph of Jaguar's golden age. When it crossed the RM Sotheby's auction stage in 2016, jaws dropped. $21.8 million later, it became the most expensive British car ever sold at the time. But that crown wouldn't last long, because another British legend was waiting to dethrone it. The Jaguar D-Type is more than a machine. It's a war hero of motorsport, battle-scarred but victorious, carrying the pride of Britain in every rivet. To see one up close is to stand face-to-face with history itself. 1956. Aston Martin DBR1. Now let's talk about the car that dethroned Jaguar. The Aston Martin DBR1. Sleek, green, purposeful. This wasn't just any DBR1, this was chassis number 1, the original. Born in 1956 under the guidance of engineer Ted Cutting and Aston's visionary owner David Brown, the DBR1 was created to take on Ferrari after rule changes allowed for purpose-built race cars. It wasn't built to be pretty, though it is. It was built to win, and win it did. At the 1959 Nürburgring 1000 km, Stirling Moss himself climbed behind the wheel after a shaky start by his co-driver Jack Fairman. What happened next was the stuff of legend. Moss drove with fury, breaking his own previous lap record by more than a full minute and storming to victory. That drive wasn't just a win, it was an exclamation point that announced Aston Martin as a true giant of motorsport. Decades later, when the car rolled onto the RM Sotheby stage in 2017, the bidding was surreal. Millions flew back and forth like poker chips in a high-stakes game. But here's the kicker. The winning $22.55 million bid wasn't even made in person. Someone, somewhere, dialed in on the phone and bought one of the greatest British race cars in history from afar, as if it were nothing more than ordering takeout. The DBR1 represents the soul of Aston Martin, elegance wrapped around raw competitive spirit. To own it is to hold the moment when Aston Martin's destiny shifted, when a small British company stood toe-to-toe with Ferrari and came out on top. Ferraris and Ferrari, 275 GTB 4S NRT Spider, 27.5 million only. 10 of these roadsters were ever made, and each one feels less like a car and more like a mythical creature. The NART Spider wasn't just a Ferrari, it was Ferrari at its boldest, stripped down, opened up, and drenched in charisma. Commissioned by Luigi Chinetti, Ferrari's man in America, this car became a cultural icon the moment it was born. Why? Because it wasn't supposed to exist. Ferrari didn't want to make it. Chinetti begged, pleaded, and finally convinced them to build just 10. Those 10 cars became instant legends. One starred in Steve McQueen's 1968 film The Thomas Crown Affair, where it cemented itself as a Hollywood symbol of style and rebellion. The car that sold for $27.5 million was kept in the same family for nearly 45 years. The original owner, Eddie Smith, bought it in the late 60s and treated it not as a fragile piece of jewelry, but as a car to be driven, to be loved, to be lived with. He was often seen in North Carolina cruising with the top down, smiling ear to ear, wind rushing over the red bodywork. When the car sold after his passing, the crowd stood in silence, almost reverent, as if a chapter in automotive history had closed. It wasn't just the hammer falling that night. It was the sound of generations passing, the roar of Ferrari's V12 echoing into eternity. $27.5 million wasn't just the price of steel, leather, and rubber. It was the price of a dream. Wrapped in scarlet, carried across decades, and handed to the highest bidder. 1964, Ferrari 275 GTB-C. Speciale Ferrari doesn't make mistakes, but sometimes it makes miracles. The 1964 275 GTB-C Speciale was one of those miracles. Built as a racing prototype, it was meant to dominate GT competition, and it did so with devastating elegance. Only 3 were ever made. Just 3. Each one hand-assembled with experimental techniques, including ultra-thin aluminum panels that made it lighter and faster. It was Ferrari at its most ambitious, testing the limits of design and daring. The car that sold for $26.4 million was chassis number 06701, a machine with a racing pedigree so rare it felt like owning a slice of Enzo Ferrari's soul. Collectors whispered about it for decades. It was like a ghost, appearing only in magazines or private garages, never in public, until the day it surfaced at RM Sotheby's. The crowd knew this wasn't just another Ferrari. This was the Ferrari. The bidding war was vicious, the kind of moment where billionaires forget their manners and chase history with open wallets. The final price left jaws dropped, but everyone knew it was worth every penny, because this wasn't just a car. This was Ferrari's attempt at perfection, and perfection is priceless. 1957 Ferrari 335 Sport Scaglietti. This is not just one of the most valuable Ferraris in the world. It's one of the most valuable cars, period. The 1957 335 Sport Scaglietti wasn't built for comfort or elegance. It was built to kill, to dominate, to terrify its competition. With a 4.1-liter V12 producing nearly 400 horsepower, it was a monster in its day, capable of hitting 190 miles per hour when most cars were struggling to reach 80. It roared like thunder, spat fire like a dragon, and tore through the roads of Europe in races like the Mille Miglia and the 24 Hours of Le Mans. But its story isn't just about speed, it's about tragedy too. In the 1957 Mille Miglia, a 335S crashed into the crowd, killing driver Alfonso de Portigo, his co-driver, and 9 spectators, including children. It was one of the darkest days in motorsport, and it changed racing forever. That tragedy, though heartbreaking, also sealed the car's place in history. The 335S became a symbol of speed's glory and its danger. When the Scaglietti-bodied example crossed the auction block, the world watched. At $35.7 million, it became not just a record breaker, but a story bearer. A reminder that racing is both beauty and brutality, often in the same heartbeat. 1962. Ferrari 250 GTO, and here it is. The king, the crown jewel, the single most expensive car ever sold at RM Sotheby's and arguably the most coveted automobile on earth, the 1962 Ferrari 250 GTO. This car doesn't need an introduction. It is the Mona Lisa of motoring, the holy grail of Ferrari, the car every collector dreams of and almost no one can have. Only 36 were ever built, each one slightly different, each one carrying victories and legends in its veins. The 250 GTO was built to conquer the FIA GT World Championship, and conquer it did. With its 3.0-liter V12, perfect balance, and shark-like body, it tore apart the competition in the early 1960s. It wasn't just fast, it was untouchable. It won races not by chance, but by destiny. The car that sold for $48.4 million at Monterey in 2018 was chassis number 3413 GT, once owned and raced by Italian driver Edoardo Lualdi Gabardi. It had the trophies, the scars, the victories to prove its worth. When it appeared at auction, collectors gasped. This wasn't just a car, this was a crown. The bidding war that followed was like watching kings duel for an empire. When the hammer finally fell, silence hung in the air, because everyone knew they had just witnessed history. At $48.4 million, the Ferrari 250 GTO became not just the most expensive car sold at RM Sotheby's, but the symbol of automotive desire itself. A car that is equal parts beauty, speed, and myth, so there you have it, the 10 most expensive cars ever sold at RM Sotheby's.